How can we effectively promote organizational change in construction to affect significant improvements in occupational safety and health? I mean, we all move the needle a little. Linda really wants to move the needle a lot on how to improve occupational safety and health. So please welcome Linda to talk today about some of that work that she's been doing over the last few years. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Ben. I'm glad that you left out lots of the in-between activities that I've been doing from starting with NIOSH and then moving to CPWR. But thanks to you and the scientific committee for inviting me here today to speak to really such a great group of people, such an important group of people doing terrific work to prevent worker safety and health issues. Unlike Brad, this is my first PREMUS meeting, and it's clear to me now why people keep coming back year after year or every 3 years, because the amount of information, the type of information that's shared that I've seen so far has been fantastic. So I hope I will continue to be able to come. But before I begin, I want you to know I was thinking about all of you as I was preparing my talk. And the program says that I'll be speaking for an hour. But in an effort to prevent this, I will be speaking for about 40 minutes. So since I took you all into consideration as I was putting my talk together, I thought about you guys on the front end, I hope then on the back end you will also take me into consideration at the end of it. So I'm going to be covering a few topics today, including safety climate and safety culture, as Ben talked about, safety leadership, and Jobsite stretch and flex programs. And then I'll talk about the relationships between them. The information I'm going to focus on today is in the area of construction, because that's a sector I work in, but I hope you'll find the information relevant to sectors that you all work in as well. I'm going to first tell to you a little bit about the agency I work for. Got to get used to this. CPWR, the Center for Construction Research and Training. The initials CPWR are a vestige from a prior name, and I can share that with you at some point later, but we're now called the Center for Construction Research and Training, and we are the construction center for NIOSH. But for those of you who don't know, we are a nonprofit organization established in 1990 by the North America's Building Trades Unions. We currently encompass over 50 organizations, and our funding comes from 3 primary cooperative agreements with NIOSH, which is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIEHS, the National Institutes for Environmental Health Sciences, and DOE, the Department of Energy. Our mission is to reduce occupational injuries, illnesses, and fatalities in the construction industry through research, training, and service. Our efforts in these 3 areas over the past 25 plus years, have resulted in CPWR being recognized as a world leader in construction safety and health. So that's CPWR. And I'll be happy to talk about it later with anyone who's interested in learning more. So now I'm going to move on to the topics of safety climate and safety culture. In 2012, Steve Hecker, who some of you may know, many of you may know, he and I reviewed the scholarly and trades literatures and learned that over the past 20 years or so, there's been a proliferation of articles written on these 2 constructs, primarily in these industries, the nuclear industry, oil and gas, airline, and more recently in healthcare. And why? because they were looking for techniques over and above engineering solutions to reduce the reoccurrence of this catastrophic events. We were surprised to find that less had been written about safety culture and safety climate in the construction industry, even though the fatality data and these pictures, of course, clearly would classify construction as a high-risk industry. We also came to understand during our literature review that there's a lack of agreement on whether safety climate and safety culture are different constructs. Do they mean the same thing? How do we measure them? And then most importantly, what interventions can we use to improve them? So in 2013, NIOSH and CPWR held a workshop to see if we could come to some agreement, at least in the construction industry, about those three issues. So we invited 70 stakeholders from the construction industry, from academia, from government, from insurance, and then some consultants to participate in a day-and-a-half-long workshop. Multidisciplinary, small group work, lots of group discussions, and then voting activities to see if we could come to some agreement. So first we worked on the definitions. The full definitions are in the workshop report, which you can find at CPWR's website, www.cpwr.com. But these are the primary, the essence of the definitions, that typically unspoken, espoused safety-related beliefs, attitudes, values that interact with an organization's policies, practices, people, and leadership to create norms about how safety is done in that organization. So that's culture. Climate, on the other hand, pertains to employees' perceptions of and consistency between the espoused policies and procedures and what is actually practiced, what they experience. So we can see, at least at this conference for construction, the stakeholders who participated thought these were different constructs, although obviously related, and that culture pertains to the overall organization level where the safety climate is more, taking the temperature on the ground at the job site. Now, the construction industry is complicated, and for those of you who try to do research in it and who have ever worked in it, know that because actually multiple safety climates come together on a job site. And so it makes it much more complicated than if you were at a freestanding, standalone building doing manufacturing or something. And each is influenced by local conditions, including the project owner and the project manager. Workshop attendees also concluded that compared to safety culture, the overall organization level, it probably would be easier, given this definition, to make change or to try to influence and make change on safety climate at the job site level. So given that conclusion, we wanted to determine and agree on the critical indicators that could be used to measure safety climate, and then, as I said, more importantly, identify feasible interventions to improve it. Before I continue, I want to give Ben a shout out here on the great work that he's been doing in leading indicators. A lot of us are struggling with this issue. What are the leading indicators of safety climate, safety culture? What are the definitions? So we're all working to try to come up with some, probably not consensus, but some good sense that allows us to move forward. So after additional small group work and a voting activity, because we wanted everybody to participate in this, the attendees agreed that these were the 8 leading indicators of job site safety climate, at least in construction. Now, they aren't necessarily listed in rank order of importance, but listing demonstrating management commitment first was intentional, or is intentional, because how management demonstrates and is committed to safety is critical, really, for all the other indicators. Commitment is demonstrated by making sure that needed safety resources are available and by reviewing and analyzing safety policies and procedures and data trends and using the findings from those reviews and analysis for continuous improvement. Also, it's important that management and other leaders need to be visible on the job site to show commitment and walk the talk. They need to wear the required PPE, pay attention to the required rules in order to demonstrate they are committed to safety. Otherwise, they won't be able to establish the trust that's needed and is critical for improving safety climate and safety outcomes. Aligning and integrating safety as a value means that safety is woven into every thread of an organization's fabric and aligned with other priorities and other values that they have. Okay. There needs to be a system of accountability for everybody, including workers, managers, supervisors, and even project owners, not just focusing on the worker level of accountability. And incentives should promote and reward safety processes, or processes, as you all say it, which I actually like. I think I may start saying it like that. And I already say about, because I grew up in Detroit, and I don't know. I like saying that, too. But anyway, focusing on safety processes and not just outcomes, maybe even instead of outcomes. This next one, we've been told by stakeholders that this is a critical indicator. It can be the linchpin for how safety policies and procedures are actually implemented and carried out on the construction site. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project I'm working on to address this indicator. A strong, positive safety climate, as I said before, is based on mutual trust. And to achieve this, workers must be involved in safety-related planning and decision-making and empowered to speak up when they see safety hazards and shut down work if necessary without fear of retaliation. Effective communication actually, as you know, it underlies everything, right? It underlies all the other indicators. It underlies how you deal with people. It underlies how you deal in relationships. So effective communication through both formal and informal mechanisms is critical. This indicator training at all levels, we obviously can't eliminate it, but unfortunately sometimes it gets to be the emphasis, training, 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 versus the other indicators that are on this list. So it's important, but we talk about training at all levels, not just the worker level, but at the manager level, even at the owner level, safety training. And then finally, involving the owner and client in safety discussions, not an easy thing to do. Sometimes they don't want to talk about it. It's not their problem. It's the safety person's problem. But it is critical to try and do this because it's important for identifying upstream mechanisms to prevent injuries and safety outcomes. So more upstream interventions rather than focusing downstream. Now, at the workshop, we were talking kind of just what I just presented to you, definitions and measurement and things like that. We weren't talking about specific types of injuries or outcomes. But I think that these four indicators, numbers 1, 2, 3, and 8, are likely to have the highest potential for identifying upstream interventions for MSD prevention, where we know that the greatest ergonomic impact could be achieved rather than at the more downstream level. But it is important to think about the other indicators as well when creating a comprehensive MSD-specific safety climate intervention and program. And as I said, we didn't talk about specific injuries and outcomes, but it would be interesting to think about these indicators and tease out how an MSD prevention program might be created to address each of these indicators. I haven't actually gone down that road, but it might be an interesting thing to think about and work on. So once the workshop was over, which is where all this kind of emulated from, and the report written, our stakeholders, beyond those at the workshop, told us that while the workshop was great, put that in quotes, and the report interesting, they wanted something they could actually use to improve and understand and improve the safety climate indicators that had been identified during the workshop. To fulfill this request, we developed a practical workbook called Strengthening Jobsite Indicators, Jobsite Safety Climate by Using and Improving Leading Indicators. For each indicator that I just showed you, each of the 8, there's a worksheet with 3 activities. And I didn't bring copies for everybody, but you can absolutely download it from the website. And if after you see this, if you're interested, feel free to contact me and we can send some to you. Remember, it's for construction, but I have had folks from other sectors use it, even in the healthcare industry. So here's what I made this a workbook rather than fact sheets, because fact sheets are static. You know, people read them and they're facts. So I wanted to make this usable and help try to engage stakeholders in using it. So the first thing they can do is use this rubric scale. It's a high-level rubric scale that we started working on during the workshop, but then after the workshop fleshed out with stakeholder input. And so they can use that to get a high-level sense of where they fall on a trajectory from unattentive to exemplary with respect to that indicator. And I will tell you, we started off this rubric with the far left anchor being dysfunctional. And that was the first piece of feedback we got from the stakeholders is, we don't like that word. So we went from dysfunctional to uninformed to inattentive. But, you know, you got to have people, if you want people to use product, you got to listen to what they say and create the terminology that resonates with them and use terminology. So after getting a high-level sense of where they fall on this trajectory, then there's a list, and this is just the front page, you flip over on the back page, a list of ideas they can use, interventions, to improve those indicators, or that particular indicator. And then there's a prioritization activity going from 1 to 2 months, which is short term. When do you think you can implement it? So think about the idea. When do you think you can implement it? 1 to 2 months, maybe within 6 to 12 months, which would be medium term, or long term, 1 to 2 years. So trying to bring in that behavioral component of making a commitment to intervening. And then they can also mark on there whether they're actually already using that idea or that intervention, and for that we congratulate them. Today to date, we have distributed over 6,000 of these workbooks to stakeholders across the U.S. and some maybe even to Canada, I think. And 6,000 additional downloads from the CPWR website. We're almost finished with version 2.0, where we gained additional feedback from the stakeholders about simplifying wording and getting rid of some extraneous material to, again, make it more usable. Like Ben was saying, that is kind of my MO. I mean, my dissertation was only 82 pages long, so I'm like, get it done and do it and make it usable. So The other thing that we're adding to version 2.0 is our new Safety Climate Assessment Tool, or SCAT. So the stakeholders really like that rubric-based scales. And just to let you know how they've been using it is to get that assessment of where they are as opposed to a real in-depth safety climate assessment of their company. So the workbook is more high level, and they like the rubric-based scales, but they wanted to create, they asked us to create a tool that would let them conduct that more detailed assessment of the safety climate maturity across the 8 indicators. And to that end, Dr. Tahira Probst from Washington State, who maybe some of you know, and I have been developing and testing the SCAT, and we're very conscious of that hyphen in between the S and the CAT. So we deconstructed the high-level rubrics in the workbook, and we created 3 to 6 rubric-based items that you can see here for each of the indicators, and they combine then to create a scale for that indicator. And again, so people look through it, like a couple of them, for example, well, inattentive, reactive, compliant, proactive, and exemplary. So for example, one of the aligning and integrating safety is discussed at all meetings. So on the far left side, which would be the inattentive side, there's just one word, and it's never. As opposed to the far right side for exemplary, safety is discussed at all meetings because it's a high value, it's brought up first, it's not left to the end, things like that. So people can base their competencies as opposed to the straightforward 1 to 5 Likert scale, do you agree or disagree, or frequency scales. So it gives people a better sense of they can read, is it never, or somewhere in between, or do they discuss safety at all meetings? And so it's more of a competency-based scale. In the fall, we recruited close to 400 individuals from construction companies, from unions, and other construction stakeholders across the U.S. to complete the SCAT so that we could conduct analyses to assess its reliability and validity. As can be seen here, our analyses showed a high reliability for each of the scales, each of the indicator scales, and then also for the instrument as a whole. Moreover, the total SCAT scores were negatively correlated with an organization's self-reported recordable incident rate, providing at least some preliminary evidence of the SCAT's predictive reliability. Dr. Probst and I are currently developing a website that folks can go to, enter their data, and obtain either an individual level report or a group level report so companies actually can use it. We're anticipating that website will be ready in a month, but we did say that a month ago. Anyway. Also, our colleague Knut Ringen, who some of you may know, was at CPWR and still works with us on things. He has been actually presenting the SCAT to his European colleagues at ISA and ICO-ISA, and believes it will become part of their Vision Zero construction effort. So we're very excited about that. Okay, so safety climate, safety culture, and the safety indicators. I want to focus now on one of those indicators, the one I told you that our stakeholders told us was critical. In 2012, and then again in 2015, CPWR, thanks to Sue Dong, who is in the audience here from CPWR, conducted a survey with McGraw-Hill, now called Data Analytics. and learned that regardless of company size, a majority of contractors said that they send their workers who they newly promote to foreman to the OSHA 30-hour course to learn how to become a safety leader. And for those of you who don't know what OSHA is, it's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration located within the Department of Labor. Anyway, so they send these newly minted foremen to the OSHA 30-hour to learn about being a leader, because that's their new responsibilities. Well, unfortunately, the OSHA 30-hour doesn't contain anything about leadership skills. So, anyway, in our 2015 submission to NIOSH as part of our 5-year cooperative agreement, we submitted a proposal and we received funding to develop a foreman safety leadership training module, which would be designed with the ultimate goal, let's move on here, with the ultimate goal of having it become an elective within the OSHA 30-hour. So this is our overall goal for the program, for the proposal that we submitted, and this proposal is project's called Enhancing Safety Climate Through Leadership. And here are my colleagues, Stephanie Johnson from University of Boulder, Leeds College of Business, she's a leadership person, and Natalie Schwatka, who's at University of Colorado School of Public Health. I think that's what they call it. They keep changing the names on me. Anyway, so after working for about 1.5 years with our curriculum development team, at 17-member curriculum development team, most of whom did not know each other at first because they came from all different walks of life. We had OSHA 30-hour trainers. That made up the most of the CDT. We had safety and health directors from large and small construction companies. We had construction workers, and we had representatives from OSHA and the OSHA Training Institute, including the head of the Directorate of Construction. So as of the end of March, we have a final module called the Foundations for Safety Leadership, or FSL. Have you noticed that everything's coming down to acronyms now? No one likes to say the whole thing anymore. It's pretty interesting. Anyway, so we have the FSL, and here's the goal of the FSL. It's to meet that gap that I was telling you about with OSHA, but it's to introduce foremen to critical safety leadership skills that they can use to improve safety climate, tying it back in with safety climate, and safety outcomes on the job site. We started off with a very, as you can imagine, a very long list of possible leadership skills that we could include in the FSL, but because OSHA has constraints on how much time is allotted and available for teaching any one module, we had to narrow it down. So that was the first task of the CDT, was to decide what skills we were going to focus on. And other subject matter experts. So here are the 5 skills, and they won't surprise you. And before I lay them out here, I want to tell you we did not come up with the acronym first and then come up with the skills to fill the acronym. It actually worked the other way. Hand to God. Anyway, leads by example, engages and empowers team members, actively listens and practices 3-way communication, develops team members through teaching, coaching, and feedback. And the last one is recognizing team members for a job well done or going above and beyond for safety. As you can see, it spells leader. So I'm not going to go into all the skills that we provide during the training on how to actually do this. And I know you're thinking, well, some of you may be thinking, you cannot teach someone to be a leader in the time allotted, which I'll tell you about. But basically, to become part of the OSHA 30, it meets that requirement of being an awareness training program. So it's an awareness of these skills, and then how to practice them. The module takes between 2.5 to 3 hours to teach. Like I said, people can't become a leader in 2.5 to 3 hours, but they can become aware of skills that they can practice. The first third of the course provides the cost information on the costs of poor leadership, the benefits of good leadership, and those behaviors related to those 5 skills and how to practice them. The last 2/3 of the module focus on 7 real-world construction site scenarios, and here are the 7, and these are the clever names that we came up with. It's too hot, too hot, too hot, baby. And in which the characters are shown using or not using the 1 or more of the 5 skills. There's overlap. So because it's only 2.5 to 3 hours, we don't expect an instructor to use all 7, but to pick and choose which they feel most comfortable teaching, and then they'll be able to address each of the 5 within those. There are discussion questions and other class activities that the instructors can use to engage, because it's all about engagement of the students, the foreman in the class, and to get them knowledgeable and engaged in the process. So I'm going to show you just one of the 7 skills called Gimme Space. And I'm showing you, I picked that one because it's got an ergonomics component to it. So let's see if this works. So the other thing we did in the training is made everything look alike. So for each of the scenarios, this would be the front slide for that scenario. It's got the title and the name and the icon. It's got all the characters who you're going to meet in the scenario. And then it's got 3 teaching modes that the instructor can choose from: watching the video, reading the script, which is only 1 page, or doing some role-playing, whichever they feel comfortable with. We wanted to give the instructor options on what to use.
Simon, the superintendent for Burnett Insulation, checks on his crew, asks them how it's going, and if they need anything to complete their work. No one comments at first, until the trainee, Ted, says that everything is fine. Simon notices the other workers aren't looking at him.
So each of the scenarios is divided into 3 sections. There's the situation that's set up, then there's outcome A and outcome B. And as I said, there are discussion questions. So in between each of those pieces, the instructor has questions to engage the students, keeping the 5 skills in mind. What do you think Simon should do? And I've conducted and watched a number of these trainings now, and the people, at least in the classes I've seen, are very engaged in answering these questions, because this is what they live every day. So here's outcome A.
Simon disregards the lack of eye contact and turns to leave, saying, "Okay," and asks them to let him know if they need anything.
Okay, thinking about those 5 leadership skills, was he actively listening to his workers when they basically said, "Nah, everything's fine"? They looked down, they didn't want to look at him. So again, the engagement with the workers and the people in the class saying, so was he listening? Was he paying attention? Was he leading by example, etc.?
Rather than taking Ted's word for it, Simon asks the crew to walk him through their plans for the day, including any safety issues that may come up. Fred, Burnett's foreman, says they're supposed to insulate the copper pipes in the ceiling. But because the pipes are in a tight space close to electrical wires, they can't set up their ladder correctly and will have to work in awkward positions. Simon thanks the crew for identifying the problems ahead of time, rather than starting work and getting in a bind. He agrees that the last thing they want to do is damage the wiring and delay the project, and he's sure no one wants any more back strains. Simon's positive response encourages Eli to chime in, saying that they found a few places they could get in opposite the pipes, but they can't figure out how to reach most of the other spots. Simon asks them to think about other types of equipment that might work better than a ladder. The crew suggests a scissor lift, an articulating boom, or a one-man vertical lift. Simon comments they are all great ideas, but the best one is a one-man lift because it will fit the space. They can take all their materials with them, and they won't have to bend and twist to get the work done. He tells them that there's one on the first floor and asks Ted to get it. He then turns to Fred and asks him to write up a short paragraph on their plan and put it in the JHA binder, in case they're in the same situation again.
You all picked up the ergo piece there, right? So we have the discussion questions. They go through the 5, and actually Simon obviously did much better in outcome B, and they talk about how he led by example, he engaged, empowered his workers, he recognized them for doing a good job, he actively listened actually by paying attention to nonverbal behavior because they didn't say things, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, at the end of the course, we have our takeaways. It takes courage to be a leader and courage to speak up. These skills can easily be included in your everyday work. It doesn't take a long time. And, of course, the last one, that leaders improve safety climate and safety outcome. So to date, there are about 30 companies who are currently using the FSL as part of their ongoing foreman and supervisor training. And we are currently recruiting subcontractors across the U.S. in Denver with Stephanie and Natalie, in Boston with Jamie Tesler and Jack Dennerlein, who are working there, and also in the Midwest to evaluate the FSL to see if indeed it improves safety climate and safety leadership skills, both at the foreman level and also at the crew level. And I'm really happy to tell you all that as of, I don't know, about a month ago, everything's about a month ago, OSHA has agreed to incorporate the FSL into the OSHA 30-hour. No changes, lock, stock, and barrel. Yay, yes, thank you. That must have been Jamie. So we're very excited about that. Okay, so the next and last topic that I'd like to discuss is stretch and flex programs. If you can just hold on for a little bit more, I promise to tie this all together at the end. So when I left NIOSH in 2001, the data on stretch and flex program overwhelmingly showed that stretch and flex programs did not work to reduce MSDs, exposures, or outcomes. So when I returned to doing occupational safety and health research in 2012, when I joined CPWR, I was surprised to learn that construction companies are still implementing them. That surprised me. So when I asked occupational safety and health folks like Lori Welch and Scott Schneider and Brad and other people, if newer research findings showed that, yes, indeed, they work, yay, great, they said, nah, not really. So I wondered, why is it that contractors are still spending resources implementing job site stretch and flex programs despite the evidence that you guys are producing? So to start answering this question, we conducted a study. Did you guys do a study too? Is that why we're laughing? Anyway, the results of which were just published in the Journal of Safety Research, where we asked construction industry stakeholders to describe the structure of their program. And you can see based on the title that structures vary widely, and I don't have to tell you. I actually got this, it's scary, I actually got this concept of if you've seen one something, you've seen one something, from the University of Cincinnati Medical School. I was there for 7 or 8 years as an assistant dean doing medical education evaluation. And I learned that medical schools teach their medical students completely differently. I mean, the curriculum, everything's completely different. And that kind of freaked me out. Anyway, so that's where I learned this. If you've seen one medical school, you've seen one medical school. So I asked them to tell me about the structure and, more importantly, to share the perceived benefits. I mean, that was kind of the goal of the project. Today I'm only going to talk about the benefits, but as this title shows, the program structure varied widely. So using a sequential mixed method study design, we first conducted 30 to 40-minute interviews with members of the National Construction Safety Executives Group. And these are the VPs for safety, VPs for EHS. They are the opinion leaders of the construction industry. And I wanted to interview them first because I wanted to get an in-depth understanding of the issue. Then I analyzed those data and used those findings to inform and develop a online survey for the qualitative piece of the mixed methods, and administered it through the American Society of Safety Engineers, or ASSE, the construction practice specialty members. Now, I know you're looking at the response rate and saying, whoa, that's pretty low. But for those of you who do construction research, unfortunately, it's pretty typical. Anyway, so I can't apologize for it. That's what it was. So just now I can share the findings with you, but I've shared these findings widely, and there seems to be consensus that this is pretty true, and I'll show you some qualitative data too. So the majority of respondents were safety directors, safety managers, or safety supervisors, and we even had some CEOs participate. Company size varied, so that was good. It wasn't just the large companies, but 48% were from large companies. And then the majority came from the commercial sector, but there was representation across other sectors as well. There were 11 benefits that rose to the top that were either reported most often or from the online survey that were selected most often. And they are related to musculoskeletal disease, reducing exposures or reducing adverse outcomes, getting workers' muscles, joints warmed up for the day, reducing number and severity of soft tissue injuries, and then reducing number and severity of musculoskeletal injuries. So they distinguish between the soft tissue and the musculoskeletal. Interestingly, when I asked, did they actually look at the data to see if implementing the programs actually reduced MSDs, only about half said they reviewed the injury data to see. And those that did said a very small decrease in some cases, but not a huge decrease. I think there was one that said they decreased it by 83%. But here are a couple of quotes from the qualitative data that I think are helpful. So the idea of workers being athletes was mentioned quite often. And while this notion is not consistent with the scientific evidence, it has been used to promote these programs, since the 90s, and thus has become a key motivating factor among safety folks in management to implement them. On the other hand, they weren't all unrealistic about the actual impact of the Flex and Stretch program. I'm not sure that you're going to find any data to support that. So it wasn't, oh yes, these are the magic bullet, these are the best. Actually, of the 8 remaining, in terms of MSD reduction, but of the 8 remaining benefits that were mentioned most often, you'll see that these 6 that I'm going to show you pertain to safety climate, and in particular, some of the indicators that we talked about earlier. So increasing familiarity, communication, camaraderie, and a sense of teamwork regarding safety among the people who are there. We can see this is related to improving communication and empowering involving workers. The foreman can assess workers' physical status and assign work accordingly, improving supervisory leadership. Improving job safety climate, generally. Assessing mental status. So they talked about how, if they were able to do something yesterday, do a particular stretch and not today, have the opportunity to go and have a conversation. How are you feeling? What's going on? Maybe we don't, want you to go up on that ladder this morning or whatever. Have the conversation anyway to engage the worker. Showing the workers that the company cares. Now, I'm sure some folks have concerns about that, but the workers who I've talked to anyway seem to enjoy it, and it demonstrates management commitment, saying the worker cares. Aligning and integrating safety and owner-client involvement to a certain degree. And finally, the opportunity to show leadership skills for the foreman. So you can see that leadership came up a number of times in these 8 remaining benefits. And these 2 quotes, I think, help illustrate the quantitative data I just showed you. So there's so much more than just, hey, everybody, let's go out and stretch. Opportunity to eyeball everybody, assess health and physical ability, and now again, the benefits of better flexibility and camaraderie. To me, that's just icing on the cake. You do your stretch and flex as a group. You talk about the activities you're going to do that day, and you talk about how people can get hurt. So using that opportunity to talk about the risks and to make sure nobody does, whatever the issue is. And you're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. That was a sentiment that came up often, actually. So, in conclusion, anybody grow a beard over the last 40 minutes? Anyway, in conclusion, my goal today was not, although it may have sounded like it, not to try to convince you that stretch and flex programs should be implemented on all construction sites. That would be crazy. Rather, in addition to sharing some of the work that we're doing on safety climate, safety culture, and safety leadership, I just wanted to put the idea out there that while the direct effects of stretch and flex programs may be nil, there appears to me some positive indirect effects on the indicators of safety climate and perhaps on safety outcomes when workers are gathered together in a huddle before the workday begins to discuss the tasks ahead, the possible hazards, and also to stretch. We can all agree that there are a number of upstream approaches that help reduce and prevent MSDs, including redesigning tasks and tools and equipment, using prevention through design approaches, and organizing work to improve how materials are handled on the job site. The challenge, as many of you know, is figuring out how to get owners, contractors, foremen, and the crew to agree with us and work towards that goal. So for this to happen, I'm just proposing here, like many of you, I'm proposing that experts, like many of you, will have to reckon with the fact that stretch and flex programs are popular among construction management and safety people. And perhaps rather than dismissing them, figure out ways to build on them and then go beyond. Indeed, the daily safety huddle has been shown to be an effective method for communication and to improve safety-related discussions. It could be used as an ideal time, and maybe you've already done this, an ideal time to educate during the stretching activity and to start providing the knowledge base needed to think about and address the more upstream factors that we mentioned. Okay, so how do we get contractors to expand their focus to the more upstream? Well, CPWR is currently funding a project led by Dr. Anne-Marie Dale, working with Dr. Brad Evanoff, who we heard from yesterday, where they are attempting to integrate ergonomics awareness into general contractors' overall safety and health programs, and then see if and how it might affect the subcontractors that they hire to work on their jobs. Perhaps they may be recommending incorporating ergonomics education into stretch and flex programs conducted during daily safety huddles. And I was at a talk yesterday, Dr. Yazdani talked about integrating MSD education into existing structures as a way to get that in. So that's what I was thinking about when he was talking. I guess the point is, we might want to figure out how to use stretch and flex programs as a foot in the door for providing ergonomics education, for improving safety climate, and for moving folks higher up the hierarchy of controls pyramid, where we like to hang out. I found this recent quote from Safety Week. We have Safety Week in the beginning of May. It's from the superintendent at Skanska USA in Charleston. Skanska's all over, but this guy's in Charleston. It's about the men being in the same place at the same time doing the same thing, realizing that no one's value is any less than the man standing next to you, realizing that we have an opportunity to start our day off in a very unified approach to create the safest environment. The program provides a sense of unity and builds trust among workers who are completing dangerous tasks each day. And this quote seemed to bring together a lot of the topics that we've been talking about today, and I think it does give us an opening that we might consider using to move forward. So thank you for your time and attention, and thanks again for inviting me. Okay, remember that slide I showed you. No stupid questions, no stupid answers. So, any questions?
Thanks so much for your presentation. I'm Catherine Trask from the University of Saskatchewan. When I did work in construction before, and now that I'm doing work in agriculture, I see a general idea where toughness and forbearance for some of the risk factors are seen as a virtue. And I wonder if some colleagues that might call this kind of a hegemonic masculinity, or sort of a tough guy approach that we see in some industries. I'm wondering if in one of the take-home messages for the FSL, where it said it takes courage to speak up, I wondered if that was a conscious effort to sort of use that tough guy approach as kind of a foothold. And yeah, I was just curious if there are other aspects of the program where you tried to use being a tough guy as a benefit rather than as a challenge.
Huh. That's really interesting. I didn't show you the definition in the FSL early on in the didactic part. We have a definition of FSL, and the word courage came up. Actually, it was from the CDT about that it's difficult to, it can, and I'm not sure if this is what you're saying, but it's to go over and above that kind of macho image. It takes courage to do that. discussion of the macho image actually wasn't specified in there, but it's an interesting thing to bring those two things together. Now, I have to say, so when I was doing construction research in the 90s at NIOSH, fast forward, 15 whatever years, there is less of that macho sense than there used to be. Obviously, there is maybe more in the residential area and other areas and iron workers, but there is, my sense is, and I've heard this from our stakeholders, that health and safety has risen up to a place where it wasn't in the 90s. But I like your idea of thinking about, and maybe we could incorporate that into the notes, maybe for the instructors to think about, keep that in mind, depending on who the audience is, and use that word courage to address and kind of juxtapose that to the macho image. It's very interesting. Thank you. I hope I addressed your question. Okay, thumbs up. Okay. Just like Simon.
Rahman Shiri from Finnish Institute, our occupational head. Thank you for your wonderful talk. I think there is evidence that stretching exercise protects against low back pain. Recently, we conducted a systematic review and meta-analysis and included randomized control trial and clinical trial. Stretching and strengthening exercises protects against new onset of low back pain by 30 to 35%, protects against disabling low back pain by 40 to 50%, against sick leave to low back pain by 50 to 60%. And its interesting result is that the exercises at workplace is even more effective than exercises at home.
So, did I understand you to say the strengthening exercise?
Stretching and strengthening. Yes.
Stretching and strengthening. And from what I hear from my friends who do work in this area, one of the concerns with the typical, or historically, with the stretch and flex program is they don't incorporate the strengthening piece of it, and that perhaps incorporating that would help move stretch and flex programs, to a better, perceived as being better. And also the warm-up before just starting the stretching right away. So my understanding, and I'm not a stretch, and I just wanted to know why people are implementing them. I'm not a stretch and flex expert, but I think that's interesting. Why do you think it is that it's better? Was it construction, or was it
healthcare?
In healthcare.
Stretching alone also is stretching alone protects also against new onset of low back pain. Two CCT, clinical trial were conducted in Japan, I think 2 years ago, and both showed the same effect in healthcare sector.
Interesting. Well, I guess it's a good thing I work at home, because now I can stretch and I can be effective both at home and at work. So there you go. Thank you. So maybe we can get that information out to the construction folks as well. That's great. Any other questions? Oh, it's dueling microphones.
We're fighting over you. So,
Yeah, right.
I'm excited about the culture aspects of this as a way to improve the implementation of interventions, which we're all interested in, I think. So I can see this program playing very well in the corporate boardroom. But how has the reception been and the dissemination to smaller contractors, and as you actually try to move this down to reach the individual workers after the safety people all think that it looks really good and wonderful?
Are we talking about the FSL, or what are we talking about?
I think that the FSL and also the assessment tools for measuring safety climate.
Thanks, Brad. So, excuse me. So the FSL, Like I said, I've been part of a number of the trainings, and then I've also conducted a number of the trainings. And what the feedback that I've gotten from the people in the class, so these are the foremen or superintendents, the people on the job site, they think I'm not just saying this, they really think it's great material that they can use immediately, because we ask them at the end, what kinds of things are you going to do immediately? I'm going to start practicing three-way communication. I'm going to start actively listening, stuff like that. So this, like I said, it's only been ready since the end of March. So the feedback that we've received on the FSL also from instructors, OSHA 30-hour instructors who either were or still are construction workers, think that it's been packaged in such a way and the message has been designed in a way that it's very consumable and usable and valuable. In terms of the workbook, the safety climate workbook, that is actually not designed for workers specifically. It is designed for either the safety and health people in conjunction with the CEOs, owners, whatever. We've had insurance companies actually use it with their insureds to go through the assessment, go through the ideas, create discussions, and they have started implementing some of the programs. So we're not measuring it at the worker level for that, and we're also not measuring improved safety climate as an evaluation tool of that workbook, but it's a great idea for the next 5-year cooperative agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. I get to say that again. But what I wanted to kind of bring out and ask you to bring out more was kind of the moment in time in which you've and CPWR and your collaborators have managed to put out into the field a concept that has a history and a legacy to it. And in the United States, as you know, in construction, and particularly in large construction, safety culture and safety climate was often implemented by practitioners as like a behavior-based safety program in workplaces, because obviously in large construction sites, we've already done everything to engineer out all the problems. So the problem isn't the engineering, it's a problem with the worker. And so we need to do safety climate to get them to appreciate how important it is, or to get them to think about culture. And this is a fairly long and large legacy from the 80s and 90s in the United States. I won't speak for Canada. I've heard it here, but not as much. But you've managed now to make safety culture and safety climate an idea, a marketable idea, I think, across all the different groups and stakeholders. And I'd really like you to talk about that, because that's a rather substantial accomplishment.
Wow. Thanks, Ben. I'd like to think that's true. I guess I understood when I was starting down this road, I understood very clearly that there was the behavior-based safety and safety climate, safety culture overlap, and people were really angry, particularly in the occupational safety and health field, that we were even going down this road. And in fact, there were a number of people who boycotted the CPWR NIOSH work group workshop because they equate behavior-based safety with safety climate. And I think you'll notice that we've done our best to take out the word behavior as much as possible in all the materials that we've put together, out of the FSL, out of the safety climate workbook, to get away from that confluence of those two, because it's interesting. I mean, when I went to NIOSH in 1992, I came from the University of Michigan School of Public Health as a behavioral scientist. That's how I was trained. I get to NIOSH and, I was like like I said, I didn't even know from the hierarchy of controls, didn't get it, was more focused at the individual level behavior-based safety. Not behavior-based safety, just behavioral intervention. I learned a lot, and I keep that with me and have kept that with me as I've been trying to work on these materials. And when I speak and present these materials at the, construction executives and other people at other places, I don't say this isn't behavior-based safety. I say we are trying to get away from focusing on the worker and just putting the emphasis on that worker needs to behave correctly. That's why these indicators are so much broader than that. And it could be about practices, but it's practices at the management level, at the supervisory level, at the worker level. Everybody is a safety leader. We talk about that in the FSL. It's not just the supervisor, it's everybody's a safety leader. So I guess we're trying to spread the wealth and definitely get away from that behavior-based safety and bring the people who were boycotting the workshop into the conversation, if possible, to say, we're not doing that. And in fact, what's interesting, I did have one of those people on my webinar for the FSL when I just gave that a few weeks ago for CPWR, and her comment actually was, it's a great program. I was surprised and happy. And I purposely, in all the materials, stay away from workers' safety-related behaviors. I just stay away from it and try to frame it differently. Does that help? No, Ben was at the workshop. A number of you were, and Scott helped put it together. Did that address you? Yeah, thumbs up again. Yay.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Thanks. Great talk. David Tappan here from Massey University in New Zealand. I'm interested in following on from what Ben said, actually. Have you noticed any an increase in ideas that have come back from construction workers that are more related to primary interventions for injury prevention rather than secondary or tertiary, so sort of lifting it up to more systems level? Is that one of the consequences of the emphasis on safety culture? I'm thinking specifically with MSDs because we know that musculoskeletal disorders, we're all looking for primary interventions that are systems-based or broader to be most effective. And I'm wondering whether your program has unearthed some of those things from people within the industry.
Right, thank you. No pun intended, right, with unearthing. So I will say no, I haven't seen that personally in the work that I've been doing, but I guess that was maybe my point at the end where I was saying if these daily safety huddles could potentially be used as a way to do things like that, to have those conversations, to provide the knowledge base and understanding about the issues, and to have everybody in that huddle. And I know that I'm thinking idealistically here, but trying to think about it as a way to unearth those issues and think about more upstream primary prevention measures as opposed to just, make sure you're standing right or something like that. If the leader's doing his or her job well, thinking about that and providing the opportunity to engage and empower those workers who are in that huddle to think about the risks that they're going to face that day, think about that, but then go beyond that, as you're saying, and think about, okay, how can we actually set up work, set up materials handling, and think about that. for the next time this happens, or we have this. Or during your day, think about how we might do this better. But personally, no, I haven't particularly seen that. Another great idea. Oh, I thought you were going to keep going. Okay.
No. That's funny. That's funny. That's good. Thanks. That was great. So I'm going to ask a question that's probably not at all related to the substantive content that you've shared with us this morning, but you made the observation in, I think, your remarks, or perhaps in responding to a question, about the way in which the construction industry has changed, going back to when you first met it in the early 90s to today. And this is sort of an unfair question, but what do you think are the drivers of that change? And so let's just use your language from the SCAT tool. Sorry, the SCAT tool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From a sector that was, I'm going to be unkind, predominantly inattentive, to a sector that, at least at the big end of it, is well beyond compliance. So 25 years? Yeah, about 25 years' time. Has it been strengthened regulatory requirements? Has it been some impact of the financial implications of being inattentive? Or has it been actually knowledge, in your view, and there may be other explanations, that have been the driver over the last 25 years?
Okay. So first of all, I want to say I was introduced to the building industry when I was 5 years old because my dad was a builder. And we used to go to the construction sites and walk through stud walls. So 1992 wasn't my first introduction. However, I would say that there are, as with anything, multiple drivers to where we were and where we are now. Definitely OSHA is part of it. The regulatory aspect has definitely had an impact on that. It probably ebbs and flows, but that's what the stakeholders tell me. They say OSHA did have an impact on us, and even the small people, smaller contractors say that. If you ask Knut Ringen, he'd say the reason we're where we are is because of CPWR, right? So that's, but I do think the research that we've funded, that we've been doing since 1990 has definitely made a difference, both in terms of getting more people to do research in the industry, but then getting the information out, and that even more particularly with the R2P activities that we're doing now. But CPWR in some ways has always been doing R2P activities. It's just, more visible emphasis now. Costs, insurance companies, huge. Insurance companies, my understanding from talking to folks at AIG and Willis and those people, they drop them if they're not keeping up. They also have something called captives now where they put construction companies into pools, and people pay in, and if someone has an incident, everybody pays for that, but over a couple, 5 years or 2 years or whatever, if they do well, everybody benefits. They get rebates on, so there's that incentive to do that. So I think there are certainly multiple drivers, and I did construction safety and health with women in the trades. And speaking back to the macho issue, that was huge back in the 90s. I think it feels less, not that more women are in the trades now, sadly, but it feels less of the macho. And I think the safety and health people have helped do that and given people the courage. Now, it starts with the opinion leaders, those big companies, Skanskas, Gilbane, Turner, all those people. But and the studies that Jack Dennerlein and Anne Marie are doing to see how that filters down to the subcontractors as well. So multiple drivers, and I don't know that we can say anyone is more than the other, but it's a good trajectory for sure. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.